Once again, folks, as I said, this call is being recorded and we will place our recordings on our YouTube channel. So if you don't want to be recorded, you may want to drop off now. With that, floor is yours. And I thank you.
All right. Thanks, Naveed. Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining, especially it's Friday. So making some time off on Friday is always, I know. So thanks for taking some time off and joining this call and appreciate it. So happy holidays, happy New Year ahead, and also happy Friday as well. So today I'm going to be covering one of the preview feature that currently been Microsoft Purview has been released, I think about a month or 2 months back, which covers mainly a data sharing side of it. So I'll gonna just quickly go over on it with the overview and all those kind of stuff. So where does the data share currently sits in Purview, right? So as you may have already know that Purview offers a lots of a great data governance kind of aspects of it. So I did cover a couple of sessions around Purview as well. So you feel free to take a look into those and provide you the overview of that as well. But just to quickly go on, Purview provides a data governance kind of aspects of it, from data scanning across all your assets in your organization and bringing those metadata into your Purview for data management, data governance aspects of it. And so recently data sharing has also been introduced, where you can maintain and data sharing aspects from data residing in one storage account or one place, and then if you want to share that data with other consumers, so how are you going to manage those data sharing and maintain the permissions and all those kind of stuff. So that has recently been introduced. So I'm not going to dive into Purview, but again, feel free to chime in if you have any questions related to that. I can definitely answer those if time permits. So yeah, today I'll be covering mainly the data sharing side of it, which is a preview feature. Agenda is I'm going to just provide a high-level overview of data sharing, how we are sharing the data today, and also what is the high-level process behind data sharing in Purview, alongside with a couple of use cases in terms of where data sharing is useful, and it can be used, or people have been using it in a different ways, but how it can help organization or other providers who are mainly sharing the data and how they can leverage this as well. And then we'll dive into a quick demo and leave it for Q&A. All right, so just to quickly go over on this, how is data shared today? So as you may already know, the data has been shared in various different forms. Either some people are FTPing the data, or they're exposing the data through API or web app, and the consumer can access those data and then leverage those data in either the app or some other places, right? Or either you send the data physically in some form of USB or some kind of a device that you just load the data and then you share that or ship the data if the data is very big, or you send it via email, right? So at the end, there are various different ways data has been shared. But the key issues that normally we face is it's really difficult to manage this data or track who's currently been consuming that data. And sometimes the data is big, it's very hard to really share the data because of the limitation in capacity in some form. Plus, you also have to pay for your data storage cost and all those kind of stuff. But one of the big challenge normally we face is when data is shared with the consumer, it is too late that the data that they need in real time, they cannot really need access the data. So sometimes it's data is arriving quite late, and it doesn't really help them in certain processes. They need to have a quick in real time or near real time insight that they are trying to do on the data. It's quite challenging in those areas as well. And especially the big data is quite a bit of challenge, where you have a data is coming from sensors in a quite split seconds, and then you need to consume the data sharing the data via FTP or sending the USB is not really applicable in those cases. So this is where um, data sharing comes into the play. So a couple of key benefits that data share offers, which is really there are different types of data shares that we have, which is where you take the copy of the data and share in some form, or either you do the in-place data sharing. But at the end, the goal of data sharing is really to make our life simpler, and it can, with a few clicks, you can just share the data across different tenants, and the user experience from data sharing perspective is quite very simplistic. It just a few clicks it takes to really share the data without writing any code or doing any setup on any of that. And the key benefit of that, obviously, is increase the productivity, right? So, so instead of investing your time into infrastructure setup or writing the code or any of that, you can use that time for your productive use case and the work that you aim to solve business problem, right? Rather than worrying about the infrastructure and all those things. And the other thing is, obviously, as I mentioned, is it's designed for big data. So you can share a big data quite easily through this data share. The other thing is you can also share this data with multiple recipients, so you don't really have to create a separate share for each of those recipients. You just share once, and then multiple recipients can access those data. Again, it's quite flexible. I already covered this as well, and you can do a snapshot-based sharing, or you can do in-place sharing. There are various different sharing options currently available, as you may already be aware of it. Some of them are exposed for different services like Azure SQL. We already have those available. Data Explorer, we also have that data sharing capabilities available. Again, some of them are snapshot based rather than in place. I believe, if I recall, Data Explorer has in place sharing, and also this Purview where storage account has been in place, but the other ones are not necessarily the in place. They are more of a snapshot. And I'll quickly cover on what's the difference between those. Again, it covers supports different formats as well. Files, folders, you can share databases or tables and views through Azure SQL database sharing as well. The one of the key concern normally people feel, or in from a data governance perspective, is you lack control over of your data, and especially the one of the key challenge you face is the data silo, right? So data is sitting in various different places. You lose the control of the data. You don't know who's consuming the data, where the data is currently residing, and the whole data governance piece becomes quite challenging in having a single version of truth perspective. Your data, you don't have any visibility of the data across your organization. So again, this gives you a very um, a big advantage in terms of whole data governance challenge that we have been facing. Because of the big data, you have one single place to manage the data. You can control it, you can manage it, secure it, and you know who's using what data. So how really this data sharing works? Uh, so really, you just have, so as I mentioned, right, so there are two types of sharing. One is a snapshot based sharing, and one is the in-place sharing. And the key difference is snapshot is it takes a snapshot of the data. It's not in real time. It's for the batch data mainly. And you copy the data, and then that copy data is been shared. You still have the copy, the data is, the consumer still makes a copy of the data. What in-place sharing does is you don't copy the data, the provider exposes the data, similar to the link feature, I would say, right, where you link the data to your source. Without copying the data, you access the data at a fast pace, and the target consumer can access the data without copying the data. So the overall process, the way it works is the provider has to initiate the basically the sharing, where whichever particular folder on your blob storage or your area store that you want to share that data, you provide necessary, as long as you have necessary permission, you can set whichever files or folder that you want to share. and it sends the invitation to your data consumer, and data consumer receives the email notification. And once clicking that invitation, consumer has to accept that invitation, and basically consumer has to then select the target store where that data sharing needs to be visible from a storage perspective. And once you configure that, the consumer can access the data in a very similar way as normally you access the data in the storage, and it just shows up as a container and the folder, and then the file will show up there, and you just normally consume it. There are some limitations which I'm going to go over on it at the end of the after the demo, and then pretty much it will help you to see where it fits well and where there are some gaps in there. So again, these are some of these sources where data sharing is currently available. In-place sharing, as I mentioned, is the I believe it's ADX has it, Data Explorer, and also in this Purview has been introduced for Blob or for your storage account. So a couple of scenarios I'm going to go over on it. So one of the key scenario where you have a cross-organizational where you need to share the data. So if you have one department want to share the data with other department, this in-place sharing is quite efficient. You don't have to copy the data, as I mentioned, and the data producer is still taking the ownership of the data, who they want to share the data, who they want to revoke the data sharing if they want to, or set some certain time limits. It says the data sharing will be expiring after 1 month, or you want to share it for 1 day, 1 week, whatever it may be, right? So again, this is one of the use case. The other use case you have it is there are some companies who really collects the data on behalf of the consumers, and then basically it is their or their selling model is they collect this data from various different places, but then they sell the data, and the other consumer they pay for whatever the data that they share, and they just pay for as a service that they use this data as a service, right? So again, this is also quite a bit a scenario where lots of companies has been in this business where they share the data, and this is a very good scenario for this as well, where you don't have to copy the data, you just expose the data as in place, and provider just consumer just pays for what they consume. The other big scenario also is a cross-industry consortium kind of where you have multiple members or multiple organizations. They're part of this consortium. If you look at in oil and gas industry, there are different companies who really form a consortium, and then they do share the data with the other partners, or as a joint collaboration, they share one data. So again, this is a very good initiative from that viewpoint as well, and it works pretty well in this scenario as well. There are other use cases. I'm not going to dive too much into that, and we'll definitely jump. I'll jump into the demo. I already covered this one as part of other data sharing. This is specific to in-place sharing, but the key concepts are the same, right, across all the data sharing that has currently been exposed on Microsoft platform at the moment. So with that, let me start jumping. I know we have about 15 minutes. So the couple of key features there is in-place sharing. You don't duplicate the data. It works against ATS Gen 2 and blob container. It does support cross-tenant and intra-tenant as well. One of the things is it has to be in the same region. It doesn't work at the moment cross-region. And okay, so the rest of the stuffs are pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to dive into much into that. So let's jump into the demo quickly, what you need in order to set it up. I have also put out the key steps here as well, but I'm going to show you as a live demo. I'll share the slide as well, so you can take a look into those down. So the first thing what you need to do is you have to make sure you go and enable your preview feature and making sure that this allow data sharing is already registered. Otherwise, you won't see this feature available in your purview. So making sure this is enabled. The other thing is there are sets of permission that are needed in order to be, as a provider needs to share the data, but as a consumer as well, you need to be have an access to in your Purview account as a data shared. So I'm going to show you where those are. So first thing, let's take a quick scenario here where you want to share your data in a container, and I'm going to be using the same container for sharing and the consumer, but really your target consumer could be in any different tenant or any different storage account, not necessarily tied back to the Purview storage account. So it could be any different storage account. So let's say if you're planning to share one of this file here, I just copied dummy file here, titanic.csv, and if you want to share this data with your consumer, so the first thing you need to make sure that as a provider, you have a owner access to this storage account, and then you can enable this share. So the way the other thing that you need to also do, make sure that is you have a permission as a data share in the Purview, Microsoft Purview. So the way you configure that role assignment in Purview is you go to the collection, you go to the role assignments here, and making sure that as a data share, where is the data share? Collection admin, data curator, data reader, data share contributor. Yeah, so this is something you need to make sure you have granted access, whoever is planning to share the data. So you need to make sure that you have access to it. So basically you just go here, add the user, and then you grant access to yourself or somebody else. So once you have this one, what you then do is you go and click on the data share tab here, or icon here, and then you start the data sharing process. And the first thing you do is you just click on create a share and just create any share, test share. Okay. In place share. And you can just put this share against any collection item. So there's a hierarchy of collection that you maintain, a different source and all those things. So you can choose wherever you want to place your hierarchy. This collection could be your hierarchy, could be your organizational hierarchy, or it could be your other folder structure that how you are managing your data across your organization. So I'm going to keep it at the root, and you click next. And the next thing is you need to add the asset. And this is where you pick whichever storage account that you need to add your asset, or as an asset you want to expose your data as to your consumer. So you just click the add asset. And I already have registered a couple of sources here, which you can go into management into the data share and register the source, just like any other sources. You do it in ADF or any other places. Very similar sources. You register the source. Once that source is registered, then you can then dive into very specific source, choose your blob, whichever storage account that you have it there. Now, this is where you are going to see you don't have a permission to share the data because I purposely did not add myself as an owner to that to that storage account. So really what you have to go back to the storage account and go to your access management and add yourself as a role assignment, and making sure you are the storage cloud data owner. Let's pick this one. Hopefully that's the right one. Select the member. Let's pick this one. I'm not sure which one I'm using. Okay, and next. Reassign. So hopefully that should let me I'll refresh this again. cancel it out and then try it again. To have some access here. Put it as an owner for now. Let's see if that works before. I'm assigning to the right. Sometimes it takes time to refresh that. So let's see. Refresh it as well. Okay, well, something must be going wrong here, which is I'm picking the wrong account. Yeah, I added myself yesterday and okay, well, there it is. For whatever reason, I think it took some time to refresh. But yeah, you need just the blob owner, not the owner, right? So I just tested it out. So yeah, so then you can see whichever the folder that you have it here, and you pick a particular folder that you want to share. Let's see, you want to share this particular file. Click add, and you provide your data share name here, and click OK. And what it does is then it gives you a recipient. You can add multiple recipient in this case. So let's say if I add one of my email account here, and you can set the expiry date, whatever date that you want this share to be enabled or valid for, and you just create the share. And what it does is it sends the invitation out, and the email address I put it, as long as that email is registered to your Azure account, you should be able to receive the email. And what it does is let's see if it should show up somewhere here. Take a couple of minutes. So what it does is it provides you the link to as a consumer, and the invitation will show up as a receiver. So what it happens is the receiver should be mapped to whatever the Purview account that or Purview that they have been using in their organization, so they can manage their receiver side of the invitation. So what happens is you will going to receive an invitation. So as you can see it here, it shows up as a two pending that I have. Let's say this is the what I created one, and when you click on that email, that link that normally shows up, it's probably taking, but basically that link takes you to this particular uh, uh, received share invitation. And what you do is you click on this particular invitation, and you need to accept this invitation and configure. And then configuration piece is really where you need to map this particular share to your storage account, target storage account, where you want to map this, right? So what you do is you click the map here, and then basically you select your storage account where this share should be enabled as a consumer. And then you should provide the path to whatever the container that or the storage container that your share that you want to access it. And then if you want to create a new folder underneath, you can also specify the folder here. And then once you click next to it, basically it really does the mapping, right? And basically you can start using your share. And the way it shows up really is, this is what I did in my case, was I share this particular folder file, and then once I accept that share, the invitation, and I map that as a consumer, I mapped it into the same, I mapped it into the same storage account. but you can choose again, as I said, any storage account that you may want to, and basically it shows up as a, this is the one that I chose, and then I chose this particular as a folder, and then file will show up. So again, this is the very normal file that you normally see it in your storage account, but this is a read-only file. You cannot make modification to this file because this is in-place share. Only the data consumer can make the modification to the file. You can access this file as a normal file in a storage account. So that's how really the data sharing really works. Few steps, few clicks, and pretty much it's ready to go. As I mentioned, there are a few things that I wanted to highlight from a limitation perspective that normally people do ask the questions. So these are the frequently asked question here. So are you able to share the whole container? You cannot share the whole container, but you can choose a particular folder or individual files in a container. So that's how you can do that. And what about does it support different region? Azure region, at the moment, no, it does not support different region. It can only do the sharing between cross-tenant, but not across different regions. The other thing is, how can I access this share? So once you share this storage account, as a consumer, how can you use it? So again, there are some limitations which I was talking about. You can only use currently as a storage account client or Azure Synapse, Analytics Spark Pool, or any Databricks that you can use, but you won't be able to access this data via Azure Data Factory, Power BI, or Easy Copy. Maybe something may change down the road, but again, this is again preview feature. So I don't know what Microsoft product team is working on, whether they will enable it down the road. But again, that's something coming to come to see on that one. Again, it's only read-only files. As I mentioned, you cannot make the changes to data as a consumer, but the provider can only make the change. Um, if somebody leaves the organization, what happens to the received share? Basically, as long as that consumer has access to the Purview as a data share contributor, that person can still access it unless that person you revoke that access as a contributor. And there are some limitations here. Again, these are soft limit. I would assume not a hard limit, but again, you have to contact the support team. So against a storage account, you can share 20 targets, or as a target as a consumer, it supports up to 100 sources at the moment. So that's really high level frequently asked question I have pulled and wanted to share with you guys. I think aside from that, yeah, that's pretty much it. So I would open for any questions. I know we have about 1 minute, so feel free to
I
raise
had a
any
quick
questions.
question.
Sure.
This seems kind of like a wrapper, sort of a higher level abstraction, because obviously we can share data today with storage accounts. Can you kind of elaborate on what am I missing here?
So when you share the data, you normally copy the data, right? The people are making the copy data, or I mean, you can grant the permission, but what happens is this is a cross tenant. So if somebody does not have access to that particular as part of your organization, and you want to share this data, and it really feels as you don't want to give access to your storage account directly, but you want to share this data in a way where the storage account is part of their organization. They wanted to take this data to wherever they want, however they want, but it just shows as a link, and within their boundary of that structure, whatever the structure that they have. So without really granting access directly to your storage account, what you are doing is you are enabling an in-place sharing, and you are providing an invitation to the people, and they can take this data as a link, you may call it, right? But they can place it into any storage account they want on their side of the organization. So basically, you are not maintaining or responsible to maintain them moving forward as part of your storage account. Basically, you're just granting the permission, and as a consumer is responsible how they are accessing this data, or how even they are sharing the data, or further use the data for in their own internal use. So really, you decouple that. directly sharing your data, because at the end, if you imagine the folks, the companies who are really their business is selling this data. So granting access to all these different companies and all of these people to your account is not something practical. So what you do is you enable sharing, and basically you send the invitation to that people, and then basically that organization is responsible to do whatever they want to do with their data. So you really decouple this from that viewpoint.
Okay.
Any other question?
Yeah, any other questions? Just keep in mind that won't be any session. We will start back on 20th of January. So we are taking a break and we'll start back on 20th.
So your voice is a bit
January.
breaking. I'm not sure if it's on my end or your end.
Maybe somewhere. Any other questions? Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Thank
Thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. You guys have a great weekend.